Hello and welcome to the Cyber Show. My name's Pip Blake, your host of Disruptive Cyber Group. And today I'm here with Azeem. Azeem, give a quick introduction to yourself.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm Azeem Aleem, and I'm call myself as an academic criminologist. I've worked in the world of cyber criminology, and now for the last 18 years, I'm working in the area of cybersecurity, mainly looking into the area of threat intelligence and incident response. I work for a company called Sygnia. It's a teammate and a Temasek company. And what we do is we are helping organizations to build resilience. And when we say we're helping organizations to build resilience, we're looking into two elements. We are proactively helping them to preempt these cyber attacks by helping them to become more what we call is cyber ready. And on the other side, we're helping them during the time of the crisis, when we are taking their hands and taking them through the whole elements of what we call a cyber incident response, mainly from the elements of looking at the incidents to all the way to remediation and recovery as well.
Okay, so incident response and threat intelligence. So obviously we've got the preventative side of things, which I imagine is preferential for a lot of your customers. They prefer to prevent cyber attacks from happening to begin with, and then obviously there is the responding to them. So, what sort of let's start with the response side of things at the moment. What sort of attacks are you seeing on your clients at the moment?
Well, there are variation of attacks. So when you look into, you can say, well, Azeem, where are we heading towards? So if you look into the new disruptive technologies, you're looking into AI elements, generative AI. Many of the cyber criminals have started to use that to perhaps speed up their lateral movement into the custom environment. We're seeing a lot of coordinated ransomware attack. Which are becoming more specialized in terms of specializing or targeting a specific industry domain. We're looking into a lot of IoT, OT attacks, mainly because there's a huge transformation going on between these industries, where they were legacy old systems and now they're going towards more of a digital transformation, and the model was not planned in that way that they could transform that easily. So that's one of the elements. We're looking into supply chain, that you can be very secure, but if you're not sure about your supply chain, you're seeing attacks as well. The likes of our recent attacks that is happening in the UK, in a couple of organizations have hit through the supply chain. So we're looking into that as well. We're also looking into what we call as insider threats, where insiders, insider employees, your own corporate employees have come across this, where they have been part of the cyber crime as well. So it's a variation of the attacks. We need to understand is the attacks haven't changed. They're the same. The venues perhaps or the means have changed in terms of giving them more incentives to penetrate in.
Okay. And your experience from sort of the criminology side of things, I know you're an academic for several years. How has that academic background helped to influence your how you deal with the responses, or how you work with your clients on those responses?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it gives you a different perspective. I mean, we call in the cybersecurity world, diversity is very important. And when we talk about cybersecurity, we're also talking about diversity in terms of increasing the diverse group of people to come in this area, because it's the element of how you see an incident. I might see an incident in a different way, and the other person who comes from a biology background or background which is very different to mine will see the incident from another different way, which as a result is the hypothesis of the incident will be different, and perhaps we will be more reactive or proactive in terms of detecting those attacks. So based on my academic experience, it has enabled me to understand the incident in a different way, to understand, okay, what are the threat landscapes? What are we looking at in terms of the behavior classifications of the cyber criminals? And whether there is something that we can tap on in terms of the movement of the criminals, and how we can associate that to their personalities. Because you've got to understand the world is the same as well. The physical criminals have now moved on to the cyber world, and they're perhaps showing the same trait as well. So it has broadened my vision in terms of seeing how an incident happens and how the remediation will happen. Because it's not just remediation and recovery is on the system, it's also impacting the culture and the people as well who are involved in that. So in that way, it is very important to understand the whole holistic domain of the organization.
Okay. And I know the organisation's global. You're naturally the MD for Europe. Are you seeing different kinds of threats depending on sort of the locale or the geography of the particular clients that you look after? Again, sort of maybe sort of leveraging the intelligence that you do have, or what with regards to those, what sort of across the geographies are you seeing in terms of the difference with cyber attacks?
It is. If you look into the Europe element, so let's talk about let's pick up countries like Germany for the argument's sake in terms of how to analysis, and then we'll come to UK. The last year, in Germany was the second hit ransomware country in the world, according to different stats. It's not like that there was a problem in the German systems. It's like Germany is going through a huge transformation at the moment, the digital transformation, and there were elements which could have been easily targeted, especially around the critical national infrastructure, the OT environments, the public sector as well. Now, if you navigate into UK, if you look into the cybersecurity industry, last year, the UK cybersecurity industry made around $10.2 billion of a revenue, huge revenue. About 2,000 companies reside in UK. That creates a huge opportunity in terms of cybersecurity business. But on the other side, crime follows opportunity. So that's where the problem as well, that we're seeing a lot of trend as the business is thriving in Europe. We're seeing a lot of trend in terms of cyber criminal creating those opportunities, because there's a huge element of digital transformation that needs to be done, especially, again, I'm saying around OT environment, the critical national infrastructure, public sector as well. So we're seeing a trend right now, which is the cyber criminals have started to look into the weaker positions or the weaker targets where they're easy to penetrate, like the likes of British Library. Hackers were easy to penetrate, create more kind of bad publicity, or good publicity for them, but bad publicity for the client or to the nation, and then demanding ransom or exfiltrating the data and putting on the black market. So we're seeing a huge trend in European market and the UK market in terms of the attacks moving more towards the specialized targeted attacks.
Okay, and just if we just use that example of the British Library, which that you just mentioned, the report that came out of that would sort of very open, very honest. That typically there isn't necessarily a huge amount of sharing when it comes to incidents, maybe because there's an element of embarrassment around it. From an academic perspective, it's probably reasonably refreshing that those sorts of reports are being put out and available. But is that something that sort of you encourage or that you can utilise, so having visibility of those sorts of attacks? How useful is it for you from leveraging sort of the analysis from one client to be able to sort of help prevent another attack for one of your other customers?
It's a good point, mate. I mean, learning from the mistakes, learning from the past experience is very important, because what you're doing is you're mapping the terrain in terms of what happened and how you can improve that. That's one thing. There's always examples are very important. The other thing is what you can show to the public is always a bit of sensitive element, where how much deeper you can go, in terms of what happened. But what we see from the outside, if you look into what has happened, and this is totally 100% from the outside to see what happened in the British Library, you see there are many learnings to do. And it seems that the reaction to the demand of ransomware group was done very abruptly, without looking or understanding how long it will take for remediation and recovery. There's one thing is not to pay the ransomware group, which we agree as well, but there's other thing as well to start looking into how much it will cost, or in terms of how the process would be executed. And I think what has happened is, if you look into the discussions, the timelines, the reaction was very abrupt. As a result, now, according to different newspapers, Financial Times, it's going to cost British Library around $7 to $10 million. And some of their operations are still not back on. It will take them till March next year to bring those databases online. So those are the elements which are very important. There's We in Sygnia, we do a lot of incident response, and we bring our own negotiators in terms of negotiating with the ransomware group. Now, we need to understand, we're not saying here that we need to pay the ransomware group. Our negotiation is mainly to buy back time and to also feed back critical, or what we call as a black swan information, back to our technical team. Because there are many things that we can feed on from the communication negotiating with the ransomware group. But most importantly, if you pull the plug saying, that's it, you need to have those trenches already built in. If they react, which they will react, you need to calculate, okay, what is the risk and how do I create or secure my defenses? So from that element, you're right. I mean, what we're seeing is it's been a very reactive and abruptive action. There were many cybersecurity companies involved in helping them in British Libraries. So I think they have got the best of the support now, but there are lessons to learn, which, like us, everybody else is learning as well.
So what I find fascinating about that response is that you have your own negotiators when it comes to ransomware. So I know we're sort of pivoting away from that. How do you go about negotiating with a ransomware gang?
Yeah,
don't give away any of your secret sauce. But I think a lot of viewers would be very interested in, what's the process behind that.
There's no secret sauce to it. I mean, but it's the way you do it. In Sygnia, we've kind of hit the right spot. We have negotiators who are not technical negotiators. They were negotiated in the physical world of ransom, and now they've moved into the cyber world of cyber ransom, with degrees in behavior classification and linguistic as well. Because what you're trying to do is show, and this is where the criminology element comes in as well, that these are the same people, they show the same trait. So our negotiators, when we get involved, we are looking to two couple of things. One, how deeper is the impact? Because once you had a ransomware attack, you need to understand the extent of the attack. So these negotiators are helping us to trying to find out how much data has been exfiltrated. And also based on their discussion, because they're not the IT or the cybersecurity expert, they can feed back some important information which the cyber criminals don't understand in a way of they are giving those sensitive informations. So our negotiators have been core in our incident response activity. Every time a ransomware attack happens, our negotiators starts at the day one. Now, when you say the day one, we're also doing other things as well. We're doing the identification in terms of understanding how big is the impact of the incident, where the incident started, how to contain the incident. Because as you're negotiating, you're also not trusting the cyber criminals, but you need to make sure what has been impacted should be contained, and the rest of the elements, you have to secure it. And then once you come to the recovery process and once you pull the plug, you need to be more resilient enough. So these negotiators give us that timeline in terms of how much time we have based on the negotiation. It could be 48 hours, 72 hours. And then it's a game against time. And only those companies or those organizations that win the race, who have these two elements that I've seen, the speed at which we execute needs to be important, and the intimate knowledge of the threat landscape. If you don't understand your adversaries, it's very difficult. Now the question can be, how do you define the adversary? Now a pharmaceutical company will be they will be targeted by a specific group. A business financial bank will be targeted by a specific group. So you have to map who your threat landscape is and who is attacking you. And then you can be a step ahead in terms of understanding, okay, this is the delta, this is the adversary mapping, and every criminals will show some weakness. So once you start to map them, you start to understand that. In Sygnia, we're mapping these big cyber criminal groups 24/7. We understand how they are behaving. We understand what is the weak point. And it's when they attack in an organization call us for help, at least we know, we are aware of that, okay, these have these vulnerabilities, which we can also jump on it in terms of understanding what they do.
Okay. So if I give you a hypothetical situation of a disaster, so say you've been called in, not a client of yours previously, so you've not necessarily worked on, you haven't sort of mapped the threat landscape that they may have been vulnerable to. They've so systems have been locked up, no backups, and I'm sort of assuming your default position is to not pay a ransom, which again, there's various opinions out there of if you should or shouldn't pay. Some organisations pay, some haven't. So there's no backups. Systems have been, they've lost all of their PPI or all their clients' data. It's starting to get sort of there's threats of it. Look, unless you pay the ransom, it's going to be sold on the on the dark web, whatever the case may be. And your technicians have sort of gone in and said, oh yeah, no, they really have lost everything. What happens in that particular, admittedly, very far-fetched, or not necessarily far-fetched, but in that sort of disastrous scenario?
It's what we call is a hell of a day.
Yeah.
And we've had situations. Where the customers called and said, guys, it's a hell of a day. We need to come in. There's a customer that we were involved in, and they lost everything. Everything was wiped out, and around 20 terabytes of data was exfiltrated. 20 terabytes of data is quite a lot, and everything was wiped out. There are various ways to look into this. So you come into the organization, their data has been wiped out. There's two things. One, there will be a ransomware demand saying, okay, everything's encrypted. Or there's a nation state actor involved that the core purpose of them is to undermine the security of the company or a nation, and they won't demand ransom. They will just impact in terms of data exfiltration and put it on the dark market. In both the ways, it's a very different situation. You have to tackle it in a way, first of all, how sooner you can come back to operations. For that, you need to rely on your backups.
Yeah.
Now, if the backups are resilient enough in terms of keeping the backup secure, then it's pretty quickly. And then you define the defenses. If the backups are also hit, then you are into a bigger issue. Then the issue comes in, do you negotiate with the negotiator? Do you pay them some money? Now, this is something which is a very different ballgame, which we are not involved in paying the ransomware groups. But if your data backups are also encrypted, then you have a bigger problem. Then you have to start from the scratch, and it can take years or maybe months, in terms of months and years, in terms of putting the return on investment and creating that effort as well. So there are many various variations to it in terms of that. Yeah.
I suppose the upside of that particular situation is they get to upgrade their entire network, but maybe not. Downside being that they've lost everything. So if we pivot now to the sort of preventative side, so obviously I've given you a scenario whereby the absolute worst disaster could happen and someone's come knocking at your door. Typically, that's in maybe an organisation who hasn't sort of taken security as seriously as they have. Have you seen more organisations come on board with you to adopt that preventative or to adopt preventative methodologies since more cyber attacks have been occurring, or maybe since compliance or regulation? What's the sort of driver from? Or maybe that's sort of question number two. What's the driver behind those organisations coming on board?
Yeah, good question. So the drive could be multiple. It could be regulation, trying to save my skin, because now most of the top board and the CISOs are also being made accountable. So that's one drive. But I think compliance can start the process, but the real process comes from organization. In terms of the drive would be, I want to become more resilient. I think the first thing what we're seeing is that there are organizations that are accepting there's no 100% security. And if there's no 100% security, we need to develop resilience. And to develop the resilience, they're talking about how to do that. And this is where they have been working with us quite a lot. And we are seeing what we call and what we also advise the customer is around the aggregation of marginal gains. Now, marginal gains is something which is not a new concept. It's a concept which has been in the British sports history for many, many years. Take an example from Sir David Brailsford, one of the British cycling coach. When he started to take on the British cycling team in 2007, I think, the team was at the lowest, not won any medal for the last 100 years. Even different vendors the cycling vendors were refusing to sell them the cycle because there was a bad image with the British cyclists. When he joined in, he said, forget about the goal, look at the marginal gains of 1% improvement in every phase that will hit that goal. And those smaller things were how to increase your sleep performance to, let's say, 17 more minutes as compared to your competitors by bringing pillows from home, how to make your tire grip more by rubbing alcohol on the tires, how to make the seats more comfortable slightly by putting a more slight cushion on it, how to detect dirt on the floor of the truck when you take out brand new bicycles by painting it white. And you flip that into the cyber world, you're looking into those small marginal gains. And the small marginal gains is, first of all, you need to understand is that if you're not 100% secure, now you're looking into minimizing the breach exposure time, which is the time at which the adversary is in your environment to the time you are aware of it and you prevent that. To minimize that, you're looking into elements of how do I understand what my environment is? What are my crown jewels? I cannot save the whole environment, but I need to protect my crown jewels. For that, I need to understand what my risks are, what my environments are, because your terrain, at the end of the day, cyber criminals will come to your terrain and you can mold the environment to your needs. The second thing is, how do you act like an adversary? This is very, very important, where organization needs to understand if I have to protect myself, I have to start simulating attacks of how adversaries do. So what we're looking at is we simulate those kind of attacks. We do lateral movement into the organization and seeing whether they have people, processes, and technology to prevent that. And if they have, what are their vulnerabilities in that? And last point is very important is the lag from detection to response needs to be minimal. Yeah. These are marginal gains. When you ask detection to response comes to your question, you can detect it. But if you are lagging in terms of the response, it's a problem. So that has to be very, very proactive. And if once you get there, then it's a big thing.
Okay, that's great. And I know that sort of the overarching theme of this show is sort of around the future of cyber resilience. And I know we sort of vaguely alluded around it, but and we've sort of touched on the response and also the prevention side of things. But from maybe either a personal or a organizational perspective, or maybe both, where do you see those sort of lines of the resilience? Is it around those sort of little 1% increases in the improvement of people, processes, and technologies, or is there sort of a wider game that needs to be adopted?
It's a mixture of both. I mean, 1%, the marginal gains element is very, very important because you're creating that 1% improvement that is, again, give you what we call is the ultimate performance. And again, bringing back to sports, because I'm always taking examples from the sports, rowing, again, very close to the British sports and audience as well. I mean, you look at rowing, there's a state in rowing called swing. And you achieve swing. In fact, some of the winning games or the winning teams as well have won the race, but they haven't achieved that state, which is called the swing. Many of the rowers would know that what swing is. Swing is when all the 8 rowsmen are synced to the minute level, which the science says 0.1 second of sync, that when they're putting their rows into the water, there is extreme sync, not even a ripple of water coming out. And all the 8 bodies or the 16 arms and 16 legs are synced in a way that are moving back and forth together. That is where the state of swing is called. And in the rowing, that is an ultimate position. So we are going to that position in the world of cybersecurity, but you can't achieve that at once. You can have all the people, all the products and processes, but if you don't sync them together, it will not. But believe me, once we sync them together in terms of having these small marginal gains to look into where the problem is, where the environment is, how to link the people, you create a proper environment, which is the ultimate environment where you are minimizing the lack. And this is where the new technologies are so important. We are talking a lot about one of the biggest thing is generative AI. We're talking about artificial intelligence. If you go to any conferences right now, this is the biggest buzzword. There is the risk to it, and that's why the UK government, along with others, are looking into how to regulate the AI. But on the other side, huge advantages to us, companies, and to the customers' organization as well, because you can use AI to preempt many of the things. First of all, preempt the threat intelligence. where preempt the abnormal activity which is happening in the environment and trying to respond to it in a much faster way. So I think so that the AI would be better used, would be a great asset for the cyber warriors against the cyber criminals as well.
I'm glad you said AI. There's regular listeners will know that I desperately try not to be the first person to say it, but unfortunately, everyone does sort of come back to it. And how important do you see that? So you mentioned that it's going to be utilised in sort of your products and response times and things like that. How important is AI for the future of what Sygnia do?
Oh, very important. I mean, you can't minimize the impact of AI. And in Sygnia, we've been using machine learning for a number of ages in our product and in our people's processes as well. When I say people processes, during any incident response. But now we are looking into generative AI. It's a very core in our development. We're doing some massive discussions and partnerships. We just recently done a partnership with NVIDIA, looking at the whole elements of generative AI and how it can be utilized to better holistically create the visibility in the OT environment. So for us, it's very important because you need to understand is when you're involved in an incident, we're a predominantly incident response company where people are asking us for help when they are in crisis. So when we go in, the generative AI is very, very important for us. It can help us to speed up the whole operation and also to improve the response time. So that is AI or the generative AI is very core to operation of Sygnia going forward.
Excellent. And as we are unfortunately coming to the end of our time, and you always go quicker than you think. I'm fascinated about sort of how you deal with the negotiations and things like that, which has been awesome to understand and find out more. But we always give our guests the opportunity to have a little shout out to people, to other organisations. Is there anyone that you'd like to anyone or anything or any organisation that you'd like to mention?
No, I mean I would just say, look, we are overwhelmed. The cybersecurity industry is overwhelmed by information. And in the overwhelming of information, we are ignoring the basic element. The basic element is, again, I repeat, is security is a process. And process involves people, process, and technology. And if you start to look into from the basic, most of the attack, 85% of the attacks have the same pattern that they showed 7 years ago. When I say patterns, I mean to say the same behavioral trait. Yes, the technologies have improved, but it's the same behavioral trait. So if you can focus on the foundation of that, you can minimize the impact of many of the attacks. And the concept which is very important is there's no 100% security. I will be hacked, but what I will do is how I minimize the breach exposure time. As we are finishing, I'll probably bring in another example of as bringing in from the elements of criminology as well. As the South Pole expedition in October 1911, two big explorers, Roald Amundsen and Robert Falcon Scott. If you look at both of them, Amundsen was victorious. And by his meticulous planning, Robert Falcon Scott was a great explorer, but he lost the expedition, but also lost his life along with his fellow men as well. If you look deeper into that, what has happened is you see Amundsen, he did meticulous planning, started to live with Eskimos, started to look into how to wear loose clothes to improve the sweat of the body, and to use dogs instead of ponies. Whereas Robert Falcon Scott went for new things like sledge motors, using ponies, tight clothes. He had more oxygen supplies than Roald Amundsen, but he lost. Again, meticulous planning is very important, which is knowing that you don't know when the attack will happen, but you know one thing, it's your environment they will come to. It's your terrain. So you have an edge, and you can overcome that. So that's the only thing I wanted to say.
Awesome. And how, if an individual wanted or an organisation wanted to get in touch with Sygnia, how would they get in touch with you?
Yeah, we have a website. I mean, you can come on the website. We have 24/7 incident response hotline, which is mapped by our 24/7 global incident response team. So they can reach out to us. We respond to it at once, and then we can help the organization.
Awesome. We'll make sure it's posted with the episode. Azeem, thank you very much for coming on. It's been fascinating. For everyone at home, this has been the Cyber Show. I've been Pip Blake, and you've been beautiful. Thanks very much.